Hello, BookTube, and welcome to the Library Tour of Doom, a sort of ancestral curse that Lord Ganesha and I have imposed on you and your children and your children's children, where they will all kneel before Steve. And we are doing a library tour that bids fair to last forever, book by book, one book a day, forever. And today we go back to 2017. This was a new release in 2017. This is Dragon Teeth. By, in heavy air quotes, Michael Crichton. And this is about the fossil wars that took place in the American West in the 19th century, mainly between two towering figures, Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Marsh, who drove out teams there in an open competition with each other to find fossils, to find skulls and bones and whatnot, to uncover new digs, new species, and ship them back east to places like the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, and to beat each other while doing it. And this novel takes shows us that world. This was a still unexpurgated American West. There were still warring native tribes, and they hated white people. Of course they did, since they were being systematically disappropriated and penned into reservations or slaughtered wholesale. And we're watching their children and their wives be slaughtered wholesale as well. So it was not a friendly place to go at all. It was pure blind ambition that drove these two people and a bunch of other people out there with their teams to go hunting in rock strata for the animals that had lived in a thriving tropical biosphere millions and millions and millions of years ago. And the story dramatizes all of that through the eyes of a callow youth who joins one of those expeditions out west and immediately encounters one adventure after another. And it's told in a very breezy style. It is a very enjoyable story, very readable. You just keep going. One thing that you will notice right away as you're reading it, especially if, like me, you read every Michael Crichton novel as it came out, one thing you will notice right away when you're reading this is that it doesn't read all that much like Michael Crichton, barely at all. For instance, there are no incomplete sentences in this book. There's no misogyny. There are no telegraphic segments that jump from A to D to F and back to B again, as if they were hastily transcribed from poorly written illegible notes, which is exactly what happened. It's exactly what explains those passages that exist in almost every one of Michael Crichton's later novels. Once he slipped the surly bonds of editorship and could get anything printed, then you get stuff like that all the time. Basically undigested notes that maybe some cringing editorial assistant tried to scrape into some semblance of consecutive prose. You'll get good bits too in all of those novels. Michael Crichton's novels aren't really meant to be savored as literary gems. They're meant to be enjoyed as thought exercises, as what happens next adventures. And a lot of them succeed in that, very much so. Even the ones that are abysmal writing. And you'll notice when you read Dragon Teeth that you don't get that. And the trade-off is there as well. This is a more competently written book, and by the same extension, less exciting. Has less of a raw, headlong feeling to it. And at one point in the book, at a couple of points in the book, our prospecting teams looking for, the titular dragon teeth out in the deserts and mesas, will allude to the fact that some people just falsify stuff that they find. They don't go to the bother of carefully excavating and contextualizing. They don't care. They falsify what they find in order for a quick buck. And if you were reading this book and you were noticing that it doesn't read a whole lot like Michael Crichton, and you got to a mention about fossil falsifiers, then you probably, like I, laughed out loud. Because the story behind this book, put forward by the Michael Crichton literary estate, is that it was a manuscript, a complete manuscript, that was found in a desk drawer somewhere. This is the author of the Andromeda Strain. This is the author of minor works like Jurassic Park. This is an author who has had almost every one of his books translated into the big screen, each time for a mountain load of money. Even Eaters of the Dead was made into a movie directed by the director of Die Hard, and it's a great movie. And little need be said about what the bonanza of the Jurassic Park and Lost World movies, that little need be said about the money involved there, the sheer amount of money involved there. And the Crichton Literary Estate wants you to believe that this manuscript by this guy was sitting around for a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, just sitting there. Oh, I never checked that cupboard. Oh, look, it's a book by Mikey. I wonder if anybody would be interested in, I don't know, publishing this? I have seen publishers do this all the time. They tell this lie all the time that so-and-so who died 10 years ago, we've just found a recent manuscript by them. And some of the examples of it have been a lot balder, a lot more ballsy, you could say. If you are saying, as I'm sure people are going to say, people have, if you go to the world and you say, we've found a new Hemingway manuscript, well, my hat's off to you. And if you do that more than once, if you're the Hemingway estate and you do that more than once, oh my, there aren't words in the English language or any other Romance language for that kind of chutzpah. That even the word chutzpah doesn't do it justice. I don't know where the people who perpetrated that, or the people who are going to come up with new Fitzgerald novels, or the people, God knows what's going to happen when it finally comes out the other end of the J.D. Salinger literary estate. Who knows what will happen then? I have no idea where such people end up in Dante's Inferno. You'd have to talk to Tom at LA Books about where exactly they end up in Dante's Inferno. And I guess that's where you'll find all of the suits at the Michael Crichton estate, because that story is just obviously laughable. And it's tough not to think about it when you get to points in a novel like this where you're reading about people who falsify fossils for money. But one way or another, those fossils ended up being worthless. And this is not. This is an enjoyable read. It doesn't have that weird kind of crackle that genuine Michael Crichton books did. And that weird kind of crackle was difficult to quantify when he was alive and writing his books. Many a critic failed to do that. Even, the very famous big front page review of Timeline that it got in the New York Times book review, many critics failed to understand what was happening there. And if it's any consolation to the ghost of Michael Crichton, they also failed along the exact same lines for H.G. Wells, and for the exact same reasons. And the way that you know that crackle is real, whatever it is, the way that you know that it's real and not just my imagination, is that no one can duplicate it. Michael Crichton, you read a normal Michael Crichton novel, read Timeline, for instance. What a wretched book. What an absolutely wretched book by all the metrics that we usually use to measure whether or not a book is any good. And yet, Disclosure, Airframe, these are terrible books. Just terrible. In every way that is a formal structure. And yet they crackle. You read them, you like them, you really enjoy them. I'm the same way. And here you have a demonstration of the risk of that, because that is not reproducible. You can go back to something like that, or an H.G. Wells novel or something like that, and reproduce the form, but you can't reproduce that, which is why I have sort of an ongoing issue with necrofiction like this just in general, whether it's Robert Parker or Michael Crichton or anybody else, where the fiction just keeps going after the author has died. That crackle, that snap, whatever it is that the author brings to those objectively awful books that makes them so great to read, is definitely a part of the author. It's a gift of the author. It's not there on the page in any recognizable or reproducible way. And the same thing is true here. This is an objective demonstration of that, because it's set along the lines of a normal Crichton novel, and it's a really good subject. Obviously, there was probably one line on the back of an envelope saying, is there maybe something about fossils? Maybe that was found in a desk. Maybe. I doubt it, but maybe. But the book was written by a craftsman, by just a normal yeoman craftsman. And so you get an interesting adventure story set in the West with an overlay of the science of the day. But very good for all that. I reviewed this for the Christian Science Monitor. It was my one and only chance to review a Michael Crichton book. So I grabbed it, I jumped at it, and I recommended it to readers. I said, I tried to synopsize. It's not going to blow you away in any literary sense, but no Michael Crichton novel ever did that either. Instead, you're just going to enjoy it. But anyway, that is your library tour of doom for today. It is Dragon Teeth by, in heavy air quotes, Michael Crichton. I don't know who wrote this book. Maybe we never will know. But one way or another, enjoyable. If you happen to have it on your shelf, or if you find it for, a $2 download, give it a try. Add it to your TBR. But that's it for today. Who knows what we will encounter tomorrow? I'm not organizing these things, so it's anybody's guess. Lord Ganesha probably knows, but as usual, he's not telling. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.